to bring in professor, activist, and author Marc Lamont Hill. Marc, you've been stressing the point that these demonstrations are not riots. You said that on May 28th on the Griot. I invite our viewers to watch you to hear your full essay. I wonder now, after last night and some of the things we saw throughout today, especially in places like Philadelphia and Los Angeles, do you still feel the same way?
I do. I think the language of riot takes away the political undertone of these actions. We can make our own judgments about whether or not people should do them or not, but I want to be very clear that this isn't random violence and random theft. This is a political statement that is a set of coordinated activities around the country made by people who are exhausted by the state. They're exhausted from everything from COVID-19 to the most recent string of killings and deaths. And so by using the language of rebellion rather than riot, we're able to really get set our sights on what's actually happening here.
So explain something to me, Marc, because we've seen some bad actors in this, and they are white, they are black, they are Hispanic, and we have seen scenes of them stealing televisions, stealing skateboards, stealing sneakers. We've seen a woman steal a cheesecake from a cheesecake factory. What does that have to do with George Floyd's death?
So I think, one, we could look in any mass sea of actions and find people who make choices that we might find undesirable, or we'd rather make a different choice than they would. But the point of the rebellion, the point even of damaging property, is a form of scarring public tissue. It's a way of taking something that is ordinary, and sadly Black death is ordinary in this country, and making it unusual, creating a spectacle around it, drawing attention to it. And many activists feel that if they march, if they have marathons, if they hashtag, if they do all of these things, the nation doesn't notice. It's only when property is damaged, it's only when other people begin to feel the level of discomfort that Black people feel that they get attention. So when you see someone breaking a store window, or you see someone spray painting on a wall, it's not that the actual wall of the particular store is the point. It's the bigger political project. To be very clear, I'm not saying that we should be breaking and stealing people's cheesecakes. I'm not saying we should destroy businesses in our own neighborhoods. But I don't want to make it seem like it's an irrational act, or an act that's disconnected from the crisis at hand.
You know, this is going to be somewhat of a strange question, but maybe you'd have an answer for it. There's a famous story about James Brown after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and how he helped stop the violence in Boston, where he was set to perform, ultimately performing. They played it on television, and he appeared with Boston's mayor, preaching peace. The president has taken his own approach on Twitter, tweeting about law and order. I wonder if you think there is someone in this country who can step up and help this nation and maybe bring peace.
Well, I think yes and no. Absolutely, the people who are, whether it's the president, whether it's celebrities, whether it's other public-facing people, can absolutely speak words that can heal, that can soothe, who can be a balm to this. But I don't want us to get into this idea that messianic leadership can save us, that if one person could just come and deliver the nation, we'd be okay. Because even at a moment where we have Martin Luther King, we also have numerous activists on the ground, many of whom were rebelling. We also had legislation being advanced. We also had boycotts. We also had other forms of mass action. So what we need right now is not just a singular voice. We need a vision of what the world could look like, so that we're not vulnerable to premature death. And until that happens, no single person and no group of people can solve this problem.
Marc, I'm curious. I'm going to read you a quote from Dr. King right now. "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." Do you believe that, or are we beyond that?
I believe love always prevails. I believe that darkness will always lose. The only thing we have to be really thoughtful about, though, is what love looks like. And justice is what love looks like in public. And so we have to be very careful that this idea of love means that we just sit down and remain passive, or that love means that we do nothing in the face of death and murder and theft and harm and indifference by the state. Many of these young people are showing their love by going out into the world and risking their very lives, both the COVID life, the threat of COVID, and also their life from police officers. They're doing that right now because they're driven by profound love for their people, for themselves, and for the future of this nation. So I believe love will win. I absolutely believe that. But I think that part of this rebellion that we're seeing, this beautiful, marvelous militancy that we're seeing in America right now, is an expression of that love.
Finally, Marc, I'm going to give you the final word here. What do you want people to remember George Floyd for? because people are going to remember this era in America's history, and they're going to remember a lot of scenes of violence, a lot of scenes of destruction, but we can never forget what happened to George Floyd. What do you want people to remember about what we've been living through the last week?
I want people to know that he was a human being who didn't deserve to die, to be put down like an animal. I want people to remember that he was someone who was loved long before we knew who he was. And I want people to know that his death was not in vain, that we are fighting and struggling and building a better world. And while no amount of justice, nothing will be full justice if he is dead, we can get some semblance of justice by fighting in his name.
Marc Lamont Hill, we thank you for your deep perspective, and I appreciate you taking the time talking to us tonight.